Thank you, everyone. A long time no see here. Thank you again for the chance to testify on this legislation today. Going a little different direction. I think one thing to start out with, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about the effect on students with disabilities, and Representative Dietrich, you just asked the question, is there language in the bill that addresses that? I think to some extent the absence of the language in the bill is because there aren't really any changes being made to the rights of students with disabilities under this legislation. So, it's something to be, something to think about more, and obviously important concerns have been raised, but I think that the express goal, at least in my mind when I'm reading this, is that we're not changing any of the rights that students have under IDEA or under the state law. So, Wisconsin's teacher retention crisis is well documented. Nearly half of teachers leave the state or the profession within 6 years, according to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And we know some of the primary reasons this is happening. We've discussed some of this earlier. A recent Milwaukee Journal Sentinel analysis found that personal safety was among the top reasons cited by 887 staff members who have left MPS in recent years. And these personal safety concerns are not theoretical. We heard from Mr. Buck earlier some of the real concerns that he's had. We've heard numerous stories over the years from teachers across the state who've been physically assaulted, who've been threatened, or otherwise subject to persistently disruptive classroom behavior with little or no administrative support. The bills we're discussing here today address these challenges by restoring basic order, authority, and support for teachers while balancing local control with decision-making and parental rights. In particular, this bill clarifies teachers' authority to maintain classroom discipline, remove persistently disruptive students and violent students from the classroom with respect for the students' rights under any IEP, and receive administrative assistance. Requires re-entry and intervention plans so that students return to the classroom and receive appropriate behavioral support. So we're not just doing what we heard earlier and having a student right back in the classroom, potentially with a lollipop as a reward for misbehavior. Protecting teachers from retaliation when they act in good faith to maintain safety or discipline. So I think, this is one of the important things we hear. A lot of teachers will talk to us and they'll reach out to us, but they do it behind the scenes, and they don't want their name associated with this stuff because they know there'll be retribution potentially from administrators. We're all incentivized to keep discipline rates as low as possible. We also require schools to develop and adopt policies to ensure clear, consistent responses to disruptive behavior. And as we've talked quite a bit about, ensure parents are notified when their student witnesses are involved in any disruptive incident on school grounds. Together, these reforms provide clarity and support teachers need to do their jobs safely and effectively. This bill protects student achievement and learning as well. As Jill Underly, Superintendent Underly, has acknowledged, Wisconsin's kids are suffering from losing quality teachers. We know keeping quality teachers in the classroom is the primary step when we're thinking about improving student outcomes. But when teachers don't feel safe and can't manage their classrooms, learning suffers, and they may even leave the classroom entirely. And students absolutely cannot afford to lose quality teachers at this time. National data shows 12th grade math scores have fallen to their lowest levels since the NAEP began in its most recent iteration in 2005. In Milwaukee, we see 23.8% proficiency in reading and 18.9% proficiency in math. We have similar results in districts like Beloit. And if you talk to teachers in these districts, disruption and classroom chaos is absolutely a key part of the problem. Again, not like we talked about earlier. It's not the only problem, but it's a key part of the problem. This bill also strengthens parental rights and encourages transparency between schools and parents. Statistics have shown again and again that the most accurate predictor of a student's achievement is not income, social status, or racial or demographic, but rather when parents become involved in their kids' education at school. We've heard about how can we get more parental involvement and how this bill might actually help in making that happen. Transparency builds between families and school facilitates parental involvement. Assembly Bill 613 also has similar transparency policies as 614, and we ask for your support on these because it's a comprehensive bill that creates structure for public schools to develop a plan for addressing disruptive and violent students and incidents, supports teachers in managing their classrooms, and ensures parental notification when incidents do occur. This bill, in our mind, strikes the right balance. It supports teachers, helps students, and restores confidence for parents. Parents deserve to know what's happening in their child's classrooms, especially when it's disruptive to learning, and to know that the law stands behind them. Students deserve a safe classroom that fosters their success and that the law stands behind them. We've talked a lot today about the racial achievement gap and how we've heard about how minority students are disciplined at a higher rate, but oftentimes the reality is that when disruptive students stay in the classroom in these, unfortunately, not very diverse classrooms that we have in a lot of areas of Wisconsin, it's students of the same demographic background that suffer the most. So Wisconsin educators deserve to know that when they maintain law and order in the classroom, the law stands behind them. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Dietrich? That I have a question, isn't it, Willow?
No worries, Representative.
You can see that I'm really wrestling with this
Sure.
because I see the problem. I want to fix it, but I want to protect our kids with special needs and disabilities. And since the bill doesn't distinguish, and I look at the measures that teachers are given and schools are given, how do you keep the special ed students from getting caught up in plans that they're creating or codes of conduct that they're creating for your neurotypical average student?
Sure. Thank you, Representative. I think that this was discussed by Mr. Buck earlier, right? It's a balancing act. We have to absolutely respect the rights and the inclusion of students with IEPs. At the same time, we ought to, recognize the needs of learning for the other students in the class as well. And, maybe there's some further adjustments here based on the discussion. I think this has been a very good discussion today, and it's illuminated a lot of, potential concerns. So maybe there's some adjustments that potentially could be made to make sure that's a clearer distinction, make that a little bit better. But I think in general, the way it's written, it's certainly in the spirit of protecting those rights, and, but we're happy to, think about ways that could be improved as well.
No, and I take it that way because I talked to the author when she first introduced it and expressed my concerns with that. And so I just really want to make sure that we don't end up with, and then there's no recourse if that is violated. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to make sure that this is maybe a little cleaner in that regard.
I think we're all on the same page in making sure those rights are protected across the board here today.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Representative Phelps.
Thank you. On a similar note, I think you and the authors and a couple folks supporting the bill have referred to increasing participation of parents in schools and parent support for this kind of bill. But the majority of the testimony we're hearing from parents today is in opposition to the bill. And I'm hoping you can help me square where you stand on that when we've heard from parents that students with disabilities in their households have experienced trauma and social isolation in schools because of behavior intervention incidents, and that they think that will get worse if classroom-wide parental notification is mandated. Why is that not correct?
Thank you, Representative. So I think that, yes, obviously the concerns brought up by parents with students with disabilities here are critical and ought to be considered, but there is a broad swath of parents out there concerned about classroom safety as well. You can see it in polling, you can see it when you look at why, for instance, why do folks often choose some of our choice and charter programs in the state? It's not necessarily because they think there's better academic outcomes. Sometimes it's because they think it's a safer environment, particularly in Milwaukee and some of our larger cities. So I think those concerns are real. The concerns raised here are real as well. But those parents ought not be ignored in this process either.
Okay, seeing no further questions. Oh, Representative Hong.
Going back to your previous statement when you said a broad swath of parents kind of dismissing who has parental rights, which parents' rights matter more than other parents' rights, that in itself is a concern. But this group of the broad swath of parents, are they mostly white parents?
I mean, I think to some extent the race of the concerned folks would be irrelevant, and I actually don't know. I mean, we've talked to plenty of folks in Milwaukee, for instance. A client on our legal side to get police officers back in the classroom was an African American mother. So I have no knowledge of whether it's white parents or parents of other races that are mostly concerned.
And the referencing back to and using multiple quotes, referring back to MPS. I have concerns there because the public schools in MPS, there's a larger population of black students than other schools across the state, and the consistent referencing there. And then, we've heard today which students are bad. You have in your testimony here basic order and authority. Why is there a consistent reference back to MPS when it comes to applying this legislation and really what determines these different very broad terms is a concern to me.
Thank you, Representative. So I think that the consistent reference to MPS is simply because, MPS is the district in the state that's struggling the most. We could look at Beloit. Beloit is another example that often, should be brought up in these contexts as well. But when we think about, minority students, and, the data is clear. Yes, they do tend to be suspended at a higher rate. That data is clear from DPI. It's clear from national analyses as well. But when you look at MPS, it's a very segregated district. We have schools that are heavily African American on the north side, and often we have schools on the south side, heavily Hispanic. So the students that suffer when those disruptive students stay in the classroom are often students in the same group. And when we talk about MPS, we're looking at ways that we can hope to improve outcomes for students in that district, regardless of their race.
Follow-up question. I'm going to ignore said groups there. Why were private schools and voucher choice schools not included in this legislation?
Yes, I think as was mentioned earlier by Mr. Buck, I would say that one, parents are not trapped in a voucher school if they don't like the way discipline is being conducted. The sort of feature of school choice is that families have options. They can leave and go to a different school in the choice program. They can go back to the public school. So it is sort of a avenue for further experimentation, a little bit of more leeway in terms of particular policies when we're dealing with our public schools and the necessity to sort of educate all students across the board. That's why policies like this are useful in that regard.
I'm sorry. Can I ask a follow-up? There is a lack of transparency and accountability where what is reported back to the state from public schools versus what is reported back to the state from choice schools. And so having legislation like this, which we've heard many different testimonies today on why it could be, it is exclusionary learning, it is deeply discriminatory. So my concern here is that we have choice schools and other private schools that do not have to report about potentially, disruptive behaviors in classrooms. And you're saying legislation like this does not apply there because parents have the choice to go from school to school? I need clarification on that.
Thank you, Representative. So yes, I think the reality is that there always are going to be different rules that apply to public schools than private schools. Recall that these are private entities. Some of them in Milwaukee are 90+% students on the voucher, but if you go to other parts of the state, there are maybe a small number of students on the voucher. So applying these policies in those areas, it can be particularly onerous for those schools that only have a small number of students on the voucher. But I also go back to what I said before, that yes, in the choice program in our charter schools, they are afforded options. The reality is it's an option for families that often do feel like they're not getting their safety concerns met in traditional public schools. So the existence of options means that if families are dissatisfied with the policy there, they don't have to remain there. Whereas in traditional public schools, they're sort of stuck there by the accident of their zip code and their family income in many instances.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it.